Hello everyone, I'm Felden, and today we're having a little look at precision farming. Hello everyone, yes, so here we are on Haut-Baileron, the French-based game map in FS22, and we're going to have a quick look at precision farming. Now, I'm going to start off by saying this is not going to be an in-depth look. We're not going to go through all the equipment that comes with it, or really into detail about how it works, in so much as I'm not going to sort of go through and show you all the different features and functions and things you can do. What this basically is a quick look at what it adds to the game and how it really affects how we play the game and the way we play the game. Because what it adds is an awful lot of data, and some of it's very interesting if you're like me and you enjoy that sort of thing. There's a lot of science and a lot of numbers involved, but in the grand scheme of things it doesn't actually affect how we play the game that much in terms of having to do anything differently. And some people might disagree with that, but I generally don't think that it does. So let's go to the very first thing. We've got in the help menu, and this is something very much worth reading through when you have a bit of time. We've got all these precision farming help topics, things like soil types, which we will take a brief look at, soil sampling, pH value, nitrogen value, yield maps, variable seed rate, which is a new thing from FS22 that we didn't have in the FS19 version, weed control with spot spraying. That's a new addition to the herbicide sprayers. You can spot spray now instead of just spraying the whole field, and that's because weeds don't appear on the whole field now. They actually come much more scattered out, which is very, very good. Then you've got the nitrogen sensor in manure, for manure spreaders and digestate and everything. Again, very interesting stuff. There's a lot of real-world science into this DLC, which is very, very interesting. So, so all this is important stuff if you want to know the nitty-gritty and all the super details about it. The main things that we're going to sort of touch on is the environmental score for one. Again, this is all information that you'd probably want to have a read through yourself at some point. And so let's have a quick look now at the precision farming map page thing. So we've got this. Now this is one of the sort of important things that we'll need to do in the game that it adds in terms of things we have to do. So as you can see here on the soil types screen now, and these fields are looking fairly blank, but they have these environmental score banners on them. And at the moment there's everything's basically at the default value because we've done nothing. This is a brand new save game and we don't know anything about any of these fields that we own. As I did just mention briefly, you can do soil sampling, which gives you an idea of what type of soil you have in the fields. Now that can be done manually with a soil sampling device that comes as part of the DLC, or there's the easy option, which is just buying it straight off this menu. So if we select this field here, we get the option down at the bottom there to purchase soil information. So we're going to do that. And it brings up this handy little sort of receipt information screen. It says it would take 12 soil samples to do if you did it yourself probably, and some cost implications there, so we'll accept that. And you can see there we've got some colour on our field now. If we go over to the other two as well and do the same thing there, different size fields, different number of samples needed, different cost in the long run. And you can see now we've got a bit of a colour map built up of different types of soil. Now for our three fields that we own, we've got silty clay in the middle of this one, and there's obviously a band of it that runs up through the thing here. Then we've got this big patch of loam in the middle here, and I believe that's the best quality of soil that you can have. And then a little patch of sandy loam up here, which again is not terrible. And all this affects things like the amount of seed you have to put down, the amount of nitrogen that crops need in different types of soil, all things like that. And it sounds very daunting. So if we pop over to the next menu here now, we have the pH value. And the pH value is liming. It's the acidity of the soil. And in order to affect that, you have to put down lime. Now, previously in the base game, you would just spread lime over your field. And that was it. Then you'd have to do it every so many harvests, and you just get the little message that says needs liming, and you'd have to do that periodically. Now this has all these exciting and somewhat daunting looking numbers. We've got sort of various different degrees of acidity. Again, the different soil types will have different values to them as well. You can kind of see that here in some spots as we sort of add and remove bits of them. But generally speaking, although this seems very complicated, pH is basically lime. You put lime on your field and it fixes it. Now all these different things, they have automatic application rates, which is the key thing for the casual player like me, and possibly you. And so when you put pH, when you put lime on your field, if you leave it on automatic, then it'll cover the field with the exact amount of lime that it needs. And depending on how often you do that, because every time you harvest a field, the amount of lime in the soil, the acidity of the soil, will change. So it will start to get more acidic the more you harvest. So you put lime on every 3 to 5 harvests, you'll find you won't use as much lime as you would normally. And then we move on to nitrogen. Now this one looks really scary because it's all kilograms per hectare and things like that, and it doesn't look very good. Now the thing with nitrogen is different crop types require different amounts of nitrogen depending on what soil they're planted in. And this is, again, it looks very daunting. There's a lot of numbers here, and it sounds very complicated. Basically, you need to have somewhere usually between 120 and about between 120 and 200 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen, depending on the crop and the soil type. Obviously, that will change depending on those factors, and after you harvest it will drop down probably to about 40 to 60-ish. Now the only crop that doesn't need nitrogen, interestingly, is soybean. They generate their own nitrogen when they're growing, so you don't have to fertilise that at all. But that's the thing, nitrogen is the equivalent of fertilising. That's what you're putting on the crops to fertilise them to make them grow better. So again, this comes with an automatic application rate for all the spreaders. Manure and slurry is slightly different because it does all come in, rather than being a chemical fertilizer when you can effectively put down as much as you need for the nitrogen. It has a more like a limit of how much you can put down. The help information should tell you exactly what that is, I believe, or at least give you a better guide to it. And obviously if you use the machines yourself, then you'll see. But usually I want to say it puts down up to about like 80 to 100 kilograms per hectare, something around those lines. Whereas the chemical spreaders and sprayers that use either liquid or solid fertilizer, they can do up to the maximum to 200 kilos per hectare. So those can be quite handy. Now the thing is, again with this, it's all variable rate stuff. So depending on what crop you've got, what soil type it is, how much nitrogen is already there, if you leave your spreaders on automatic, it'll deal with itself. You won't have to worry about it. And the other good thing it has is this yield information. I almost called it a yield score. But this basically tells you how much, when you harvest, how much crop you've got, like the percentage of yield that is expected. And if we can't see it from this screen, but if we go back to the regular map screen, when you go into the purchasing menu and you select a field, you see on the left side it has an expected yield potential of 93% for field 38. If we hop over to field 41, it goes up to 120% over the norm. because it's mostly loam, and that means that you'll get a lot more off of it. And that's where that yield map, yield information comes in. Because you could get sort of 100% yield, which is what you would expect to get off of a normal field at the average rates of everything. So that can be handy, sort of economic information there. And then you've got your seed rate, and now this is based on the type of soil and the type of crop that you're planting. Different soils require more or less seeds in order to have the best potential for growth. And again, that has an automatic rate. So once you've got your soil maps, which we have here, when you pop out with a seeder, if you leave it on automatic, it'll put down whatever you need. And if we pop up the main environmental score, you may have noticed it did start on 50 to begin with, and now it's on 58. That's because we've soil sampled all of these fields, or at least we purchased the data for it. So that automatically jumps up the soil sampling slider. Now these are important to pay attention to, because the better your score is, the more profit you get when you sell. And you can get up to a 15% bonus on your crop value for having a good environmental score. But on the flip side of that, if you pay zero attention to it and really just screw up your fields sort of thing and do the wrong types of weed control and plough it every 5 minutes and all sorts of things like that, then you'll have a low environmental score, and you may actually lose money because there will be some penalties for having a terrible environmental score. But for the most part, as daunting as all this sounds, with all these this extra information about soil types and pH this and nitrogen that and variable watsits and seed rates and all that stuff, as sort of scary and complicated as that sounds, it doesn't actually change that much in terms of how we play. Now, obviously this field here, it says it does need ploughing, so we're going to send a worker off on it with a plough and see what happens. Now, there is a chance this will have a negative impact on the environmental score, because it's technically supposed to, because it's not of course I missed a chunk there, didn't I? Lovely. Because it's not technically doing the best thing for the field. I believe from the information it says something about it disturbs the topsoil and leaves it open to erosion and brings up weeds and stuff like that. Although technically, according to the base game, when you plough you don't get weeds, so that's odd. But yeah, so if we hop back over here and take a look at the environmental scores, you can see it's not affected the tillage at all there, and our numbers haven't gone down. Now I assume that means because the field actually needs ploughing at the moment, and if it didn't need ploughing and you were ploughing it anyway rather than say cultivating, that may then impact the tillage portion of your score. With things like nitrogen and pH value, you're going to want to fertilise and lime your fields anyway to get the best yield out of them possible. Let me get out of the way here. So that's not changed. And if you leave it on automatic, then you won't have to worry about it. Now the interesting thing is, depending on how you want to fertilise your fields, you can technically get away with one pass fertilising now, because it's a value of nitrogen rather than a state of fertilising as the base game is. You can technically have one pass with a solid or liquid fertiliser sprayer, and what it'll do is cover the whole field once you've got a crop in it with the exact amount of nitrogen that crop needs. Now that may end up looking a bit scary when you're doing it, because you may appear to use a lot of fertiliser, but the flip side of that is you're basically doing two applications at once from the sort of base game perspective. So that can do it as well. But you can also save yourself a bit of money on fertiliser. Things like soybean, for example, don't require fertilising, and certain crops will leave more or less nitrogen in the ground after harvest, from what I understand. Because if we look at this field, for example, it's currently... Oh, that's not a good field to look at. It's 10 kilograms per hectare, and if I can find a good spot so you can see it, since this is wheat and it's in silty clay, it needs 160 kilograms per hectare. So it's going to need an extra 150 based on what's in there currently. But the thing with precision farming is it's more of a long-term DLC in terms of the benefits and the effects and everything. So the more that you sort of work with, basically the more you play the game, the higher chance there is you'll save money in the long run, and possibly even make money if you keep your environmental score above average. But yeah, so essentially the way we play the game hasn't really changed that much with precision farming added. Yes, there's a lot more new data, a lot of numbers and information and science and all sorts of things like that. Now, there are things that you could do that would be better or worse depending on how you sort of generally play the game. I would think most people don't plough every single time, unless you're me running a specific challenge thing. But I'm not sure if I'll be using precision farming for that anyway. But yeah, so at the end of the day, you still have to cultivate a field after it's been harvested. You still have to fertilise, same as you would normally, and you still have to plant seeds. The only sort of main differences, I guess, is you have to have a soil map so you can get sort of the best general results. And it's usually best to plant a crop before you fertilise, unless you're doing the either soybean, which requires no fertilisation, or you're running something like manure, digestate or slurry first, because you can run over with that and get, you would then need to do technically 2 stages of fertilising, but if you put if you run digestate over the field once, then you could hit it with a, let's say a solid fertiliser spreader, and you would only use maybe half the fertiliser that you would normally use, because it's given it a base amount of nitrogen to begin with from the slurry or digestate. But like I said, there's a lot more in-depth examples of how this works and what you should and shouldn't do, and why things do this and what things do that, and how it all works. But for the most part, if you want to have sort of some of the information and the benefits of precision farming, and also, let's zip over here quick to the harvester. One of the cool things is when you are doing something like harvesting or fertilising, the mini-map actually has a new zoomed-in mode with more information on it. Because we saw the yield maps before, as you'll see, once I start harvesting this field, it's zoomed in there, and it's now popping up yield information. As you can see behind the combine there, it's showing it as a sort of an orange, sandy orange kind of colour. That's because I'm using colourblind mode. Other people, or if you don't use colourblind mode, you'll see a different colour. But for me, it's that. But yeah, so when you're fertilising, you'll see a zoomed-in map like that, which will show you where you're fertilising, and from precision farming's perspective, how much nitrogen is now in the soil. But again, the key thing to remember with precision farming is it comes with automatic modes for pretty much everything that needs it. So seeding, there is the variable seed rate. Weeding, if you get weeds, you have variable weed control options for the sprayers. Fertilising has a variable fertiliser option, so it'll only put down as much as it needs to. And like I said, if it needs to put a lot down, then it will, and if it doesn't, then it won't. So you can save yourself money using other fertilisers, or doing different crops on different soil types if you want to go that close to it, or that in-depth into it rather. But yeah, it's a really interesting expansion, or DLC rather. and hopefully, this sort of will help dispel maybe some of the fears with it, because for the most part, you don't have to change how you play that much. If you want to really delve into the sciencey details of it, you can, and you can see exactly how much fertilizer affects things, and what the nitrogen values of the crops and this, that and the other are for, and how all that stuff works. You certainly can go really, really far down the old rabbit hole with that. But the thing is, you don't have to. If you just want to sort of keep playing the game as relatively normal, but maybe have some of the sort of realism aspect of it in there, and some of the benefits of it, like the mini-map stuff, and the potential sales increase if you're doing good to your fields and everything, then you can read up a little bit on it and learn some of the ways to get a better environmental score. And realistically, you don't have to do that much. You don't have to do anything massively different. Maybe you have to use a shallow cultivator instead of a deep cultivator, or a plough or something every time you do work. If you only plough once in a blue moon anyway, then you should be good. If you like cultivators, then you should be fine too. It's one of those things where there's a lot of potential ways to improve things from the game's perspective, but also it doesn't really change the basic structure of how we play. You harvest a field, you cultivate it, you plant in it, you fertilise it, you put lime on it if it needs it, that sort of thing. That's all still the same. We just have more sort of in-depth data about what the fertilising is. How much fertiliser we're putting down, that sort of thing. So, realistically, it doesn't have to change the game, the way you play the game, that much. And I think that's a big thing that maybe puts people off with this. In FS19 as well, was that it looks so sciencey and complicated, and you just want to play the game. You just want to have fun, do some farming, not worry about science. And realistically, you don't have to, even with this DLC. I would recommend having a skim through the help section, just to see the basics of what it's all about. But for the most part, generally, you're still going to be playing it pretty much the same as you were before. You harvest, you cultivate, you seed, you fertilise, you're golden. So I hope this maybe has helped some people out, maybe dispelled a little bit of the uncertainty of it, as it were. Like I say, there'll be definitely other people doing much more in-depth looks than I am. I would certainly recommend taking a look at MrSealyP's videos. I believe Farmer Cop and Farmer Envoy Extreme, they've done some. All your favourite YouTubers have most likely done something for the Precision Farming DLC. If not now, then soon. I'll put a few links into the ones that I've seen that look pretty good. And again, it's a free DLC, so if you really don't like it, you don't have to use it. And that's okay too. But, like I say, for the most part, it generally doesn't change how you play that much. Besides actually buying the soil maps here, which is definitely a new thing, beyond that, there's not really a lot extra you have to do. So, on that note, if you've enjoyed whatever this was, then please give us a like and hit the old subscribe button too there if you haven't already. And if you'd like to share this video, that would be greatly appreciated. And of course, comments are always welcomed as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on precision farming. Is it something you're interested in? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Has this changed your mind on it, for example? It's all good with me. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time. Cheerio, everyone.